You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hey y'all, spooky season is here. And if you're looking for a show to whet your appetite for a little haunted history, then I'd like to invite you to check out Southern Gothic, a chart-topping history podcast that explores some of the most infamous legends, folklore, ghost stories, and hauntings of the American South. We've covered all sorts of stuff from the Bell Witch of Tennessee to the disappearance of the Confederate submarine, the H.L. Hunley. Not to mention our deep dives into the local lore of some of America's oldest and most haunted cities, like New Orleans, Charleston, and St. Augustine. So, if you're ready for a little good old-fashioned Halloween storytelling with a commitment to quality historical research, then be sure to check out Southern Gothic today. It's available now on all your favorite podcast apps.
Have you ever thought about what would happen if your airline window popped out? Or if you could build a jetpack using only machine guns? Turns out you can, but you really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, host of a podcast that's for weird people who like learning about weird stuff. It's called, Well, That's Interesting, and it's a comedy science-y show that tells the story behind the facts because, as it turns out, those stories are funny. The facts are bizarre, the stories are epic, and the laughter is plentiful. So, join the flock and listen to Well, That's Interesting wherever you do podcasts.
Hello, delicious friends, and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me, your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and writer of books. What? Yes, are any of us really that surprised this is happening? A wee bit, but are we excited? Yes, we're excited. Okay, so I'm going into like Sesame Street voice there a wee bit. But yeah, the embargo was lifted. I can talk about it now. This is like one of many embargoes I have on me for this year. Wow, it's wild. It is wild because this all started because I was very angry. I mean, I used to write things when I was younger, but I was very angry about this book that I read about this amazing woman, and I was so mad at it. I was like, no. If you've been following my socials for, ever, then you might remember me ranting in the back garden, just like complaining about how awful this book was and how the tone and just the message of it was just absolute bollocks, and I was so mad. Anyway, yes, I should tell you about my book. Yes, it is Whores, Harlots and Hussies, The Incredible Lives of the Bad Women from History. We went through many changes to get that title, but I wanted harlots in there. I was like, harlots. I saw the press release, and in the press release, I'd actually said, and who doesn't love a good tart? But they removed it, and I was like, oh man, I am going to slip that in to as many interviews as I possibly can. So yeah, that's happening. So information about the book I should probably give you. So it's going to be out a couple of years. No, it's going to be ready for pre-order. It's ready for pre-order sort of next year. I think it's early next year. Springtime next year is when the pre-orders will open up for it. And that's just, it's just industry stuff, really. And I've been asked so many times, will I be doing the audiobook for it? Delicious friends. Why would you ask such a question? Of course I'm going to do the audiobook. Do you think I'm going to let people do that when I have this voice? And I can talk like this if I want to. I can do that. I can go soft and close to the microphone, like a weird ASMR situation. Or I can read normally. We'll see how that turns out. But no, yeah, this is my baby. It's not leaving my lips. It's all for me. There also might be a few really interesting things in the work that are going to be happening, and I'm going to be doing more festivals and in some more bits around the country. I'm kind of sticking to Ireland a lot for the rest of this year, just because the book and everything, there's so much happening. It's just taken up a lot of my time. That being said, So, you know how I'm a dual citizen, yeah? Well, I mentioned this before, but I thought it'd be very, very funny because I got a message from like the British Podcast Awards going, you want to apply? And I went, yeah, let's do it. So I don't know like if I'm in any category whatsoever, whom's to say, but I am eligible for the listener's choice. And as one would guess, you vote for it. And so I would greatly appreciate absolutely everybody finding every email they've ever used in their life and just voting, because it's like one vote per email, because you have to like prove that you're not doing multiple votes, because you gotta like click it and, you know, validate it or whatever. So it'd be amazing, because I think it would be so funny, because I spend so much time, like I've lived in Ireland most of my life, and I just think it'd be very, very funny to win, to just show up in England and be like, hey, the Scottish and the Irish in me. So it's like, ooh, let's do it. Oh yeah, and I broke up with the cardigan now, so I'm single now. So that's a thing. Yeah. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, quit your jibber jabber and fact me, and fact you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. Our sources are Tallulah, My Autobiography by Tallulah Bankhead. Miss Tallulah Bankhead by Lee Israel. Frankly, My Dear, Gone with the Wind Revisited by Molly Haskell. Tallulah, The Life and Times of a Leading Lady by Joel Lobenthal. Queers in History, The Comprehensive Encyclopedia of Historical Gays, Lesbians and Bisexuals by Ian McKellen and Keith Stern. And of course we have Flappers, 6 Women of a Dangerous Generation by Judith Mackrell. And Tallulah Bankhead, A Bio-Bibliography by Jeffrey Carrier. And lest we forget, we still have biography.com, smithsonian.com, and history.com. Wonderful. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. Did you really think I was going to go Pride without talking about a fabulous bisexual? How very dare you? But yes, we are talking about one Tallulah Bankhead. If you were at my first Glasgow show, the one that was completely sold out, then you would have heard me talk about this, and I am, bringing it up again. So sorry, it probably won't be as funny because my cousin won't be there just heckling me. I've always said at a live show, if you're going to heckle me, at least have the decency to be funny. So because I'm flying away to Copenhagen tomorrow, I know you're like, you have to go to other countries. I know, right? I know. But because of that, I decided I didn't have time to do the episode on Lord Byron that I really wanted to do, because it's very detailed and there's just so much going on that I thought, hey, Tallulah Bankhead is wonderful, darling. And she's a fun bisexual. I mean, she's also awful. So fucking awful that I felt the need to share her with you. Like, I love her. She's bad. So anyway, let me start at the beginning, which, as Julie Andrews says, is a very good place to start. So Tallulah's parents met in December 1899. Oh yeah, we start with a scandal, by the way. It is, I mean, she comes into this world just like, wow. It's a whole thing, right? So her parents meet in December 1899, and like this meet cute, Miss Adelaide Eugenia is out shopping when she crosses paths with a dashing young fellow, Mr. William Bankhead, in Huntsville, Tennessee. It is love at first sight, even though it is, as some might say, a wee bit inconvenient, because Adelaide, the reason she was out shopping is she was out buying her wedding dress. And she, I don't know, gazes across the lace or whatever, the tulle, the silk chiffon, and she sees this very handsome man, and she's like, ding, 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 ding. So anyway, they get married in Memphis on January 31st, 1900. So like a month later, they meet and then get married like a month and a half later. Like they are bad for each other. But they fall in love and they have 2 children in quick succession, Eugenia and Tallulah. I fucking love these names. I really do. So Tallulah Bankhead was born on her parents' 2nd wedding anniversary, 31st of July 1902. And unfortunately, Adelaide Eugenia, her mother, contracts sepsis and passes away 3 weeks later. Basically, complications from childbirth. She ends up with sepsis. I mean, again, the main cause of death for women, childbirth. The second cause of death, men. Ugh. So as she's lying on her deathbed, she turns to her sister, Adelaide does, and she goes, "Take care of Eugenia." I'm not great at accents. "Tallulah will always be able to take care of herself." Listen, I don't know a Tennessee accent, and I feel like I did okay. We're just going to accept it, I think. Okay, good. So Tallulah actually gets baptized next to her mother's coffin, which is weird. What? That's creepy, right? Right? I mean, maybe it's a healthier sort of relation with death, kinda, I guess. So anyway, her family are very political. Like, her dad's in Congress, he's later the Speaker of the House, and like he is like doing very well up until, you know, the early demise of the love of his life, his wife, and her death triggers a like depressive state, which he numbed with alcohol. And so the care of the girls was left to their aunt, his sister-in-law, and the kid's grandmother. So the kids grew up, they're a wee bit different. Eugenia was slim. She's like traditionally pretty. She would have been sort of the epitome of a Southern belle. Like, she was so cute and slim and perfect. And she would get praised. And Tallulah, now, Tallulah wouldn't. Because growing up, they referred to her as chunky and husky. Listen, I don't appreciate anybody commenting on a child's weight. I don't like to comment on anybody's weight ever. I think it's like an awful thing to do. But like, do not ever call a child chunky, because I will punch you in the face, I will hit you, and I will put laxatives into your food. I'll find a way to do it. I will come for you. Like, I don't appreciate it. Oh, another thing they said called her was actually extremely homely, which is just another way of, you know, commenting on a child's weight. So, and because, you know, Eugenia, she's getting like praise, she's being told how beautiful she was and how wonderful she was, Tallulah acts out as a child would. She has tantrums, she would cause scenes, she would be so dramatic. I don't know what that's like. I wouldn't be like that at all. So it got to the point where her tantrums were just like so big and loud and just too much, right? They would throw buckets of ice on her, like the grown-ups would, and her sister would hide in the cupboard. Like, of the two girls being hiding in the closet, you wouldn't think it's Eugenia. Not that Tallulah ever actually hid in a closet. Like, nope, she was out and about. So growing up, it's not great for her. And as a child, she actually contracts bronchitis, which was left untreated. And this is what led to her husky voice. Like, near enough everyone you know can do a Tallulah Bankhead, like, impression. But, like, they probably don't know where it's from. Most of them do. "Darling, this voice is the Tallulah Bankhead voice. And this is how she got her voice, because she had untreated bronchitis." Which which is why I always sound really sexy whenever I've got bronchial issues. Good to know it's not just me. So yeah, she ends up with this husky voice, and she grew up sort of causing a scene to get attention. At one point, she just goes to the circus and learns to cartwheel. She recites literature, she sings and dances because she's hungry for attention. She's hungry for it. And she does everything to maintain it and to get it because she sees herself as not being anything. And her gran is like watching her do this. She's like trying to become this performer, and her gran's like, fuck this for Game of Soldiers, and enrolls both the girls in a convent school. So the girls get shipped off to the Convent of the Sacred Heart in Manhattanville, which is, I'm sure you've guessed, a Catholic institution, which is interesting because both of the girls are Methodist. And so, just like, let's keep around the nuns. Nuns. And when her dad ends up in Washington, the girls are enrolled in different schools, each time getting closer and closer to Washington. So during term time, during the school year, they would be in like these different institutions. And then when it came to like summertime, they'd be back in Alabama. So growing up as well, Tallulah was actually friends with the one and only Zelda Sayre. And you might be thinking, who is Zelda Sayre? That name sounds vaguely familiar. Well, she goes on to be a Mrs. Zelda Fitzgerald, who deserves far more credit than she's ever given, and we will be discussing her one day because I fucking love her. Okay. So when Tallulah is 15, her auntie, she convinces her to go on a diet, and it works. And this ugly duckling becomes a swan. And just as aggressive, they will beat you in the face. I don't care what anybody says. So she goes on a diet. She ends up getting the perfect figure of the era. And she is a pure Southern belle. Oh dear, oh my, she is that gorgeous. So this is where her big break happens. So there's this magazine called Picture Play, and it's like a weekly glossy, and it has this contest for models. And so she sends in her picture. She's so excited. She's like, I'm going to send in my picture because there's a competition where you get like a part in a movie. And she's like, yeah, it's going to be great. I'm going to do it. And she does this and she sends it away. But what Tallulah forgets to do is put any details about herself with the picture. Her name, her address, a state, nothing is there. So one day, she's just flicking through the pages of Picture Play, and there is her photo, under which has the caption, "Who is she?" And so she wins a small part in like a play, and 15-year-old Tallulah arrives in New York, chaperoned by her aunt, of course. Her Aunt Louise is there to take care of her and make sure that everything is on the up and up. And so Tallulah is not too impressed with this little walk-on part she's got in this movie. She's like, I feel like I should have more. So she isn't impressed with the role she got. However, she is very impressed with the Algonquin Hotel, where the artistic elite have their abode. So Tallulah gets right in the middle of the social circle, and it ends up being called the Algonquin Round Table. And her and these three other gals being pals, they were known as the Four Riders of the Algonquin. What's interesting is like three, or like all of them are LGBT, like they're either lesbian or bisexual, I'm like convinced. Yeah. So you've got Estelle Winward, Blythe Daly, and Eva Legalian, and obviously Tallulah. So out of the Four Riders, three of them are LGBT, Tallulah, Eva Legalian, and Blythe Daly. Which is just, you just love to see representation, don't you? So, um, so before she had actually travelled to New York City, her father had warned her against the evil vices of men and liquor. And Tallulah later on quipped that he didn't say anything about women and cocaine. Now, Tallulah did abstain from booze to begin with, but she did take a lot of blow. She went on to say, cocaine isn't habit forming. I should know. I've been taking it for years. This is a really bad impersonation of Tallulah Bankhead, but unless her ghost comes up to get me, I think you are fucking awful, darling. Then I should be okay. So she's partying, she's racking up bills, and the owner of the Algonquin is like, I can either run the hotel or manage Tallulah Bankhead. Like, both is not an option. Like, this is just too much. So she's there. Her social life is off the chart. Her career is less so. So in 5 years, she appears in plays and silent movies, but she doesn't really get picked for a lot of major parts because they'd say that she is not pretty enough for the screen. Like, it's fucking bullshit. It's absolute bullshit, but that's what stupid men were saying. So another person who was staying at the Algonquin was one John Barrymore, who was like Hollywood royalty, Drew Barrymore's grandfather, and he was also a bit of a dish, apparently. So she had this like major crush on him, and one day, like after one play, he invites her to his dressing room, and she goes in, and he flashes at her. He exposes himself. And Tallulah, being Tallulah, who's still just a teenager at this point, she's 15, 16 at this, she looks him up and down. She gets a good look, tilting her head and everything, and she rejects him, which just good for you, Tallulah. She's like, woo me, you prick. And I feel that too. Like, if you want to be involved with me, fucking woo me. I deserve it. Tallulah deserves it. At least for now. I love her so much. So for 5 years, she's in flop after flop. And an astrologer tells her that she must move to London. Swim if you have to. And so, yeah, London is calling. And so she moves there. She sets her sight on the stage and also a baron that she knew from New York City. I can't help myself. So Lord Napier Allington, who is an absolute fuckboy. He's the worst. He's sort of hot and cold, and we'll get into him later, right? So she goes to this London theatre where this producer has offered her a part, and he then retracts the offer. He's like, here's the role. Actually, no, I'm not giving it to you. And so Tallulah said she was coming to the theatre anyway. The producer's like, please don't do that. And so she arrives at this London theatre where the rehearsal is, happening. It's going on. And she's just like, bitches, I have arrived. And so they end up giving her the part, and she becomes this massive success. Like, there's headlines in the papers going, Tallulah Baloo. Meanwhile, she's having this torrid love affair with the Baron. Like, are there any good barons? Are there? I think not. So they're meeting between shows, they're sneaking time together, like they're literally seeing each other between acts, right? And so it's kind of romantic, but not actually, because he was such a dick. Like, she was in love with him because, like, the way that you fall in love as a teenager, like, it's all encompassing. It is overwhelming and deep and fulfilling, and he's just a man. So anyway, she's conquering the West End, and she's just like doing so well in her career. And he would just disappear for weeks, months, etc. and not say a bloody word. He would just go and leave her alone. He would just bugger off. And Tallulah's just trying to manage her own life, you know. But luckily, she has this huge female fan base. Like, the lesbians are out in force. There's a bisexual awakening happening for a lot of people. And they're not really aware of it, I don't think. But it's happening. So there's a bunch of women who go to her play like every night for the whole 10-month run of the show. There's a group of girls up in the galley and they proclaim the gallery, and they're proclaiming her love for her. They would throw flowers, they would stomp and scream when she appeared. Like, they were just like, ah, you know when they say how teenage girls reacted when the Beatles showed up, right? And they act like it was this big cultural phenomenon. Like, I read this about the girls who were like part of the Tallulah Bankhead, like the big fan base. And I think maybe this seems like the start of it because these women were just letting themselves live. So I actually think this is more of Tallulah than it is of the Beatles. I'm just putting it out there. So Tallulah appears in 16 London plays, including the Pulitzer Prize winner. They knew what they wanted. But it wasn't all sunshine and cocaine. When the playwright Somerset Maugham recast her last minute for his play Rain, she was absolutely devastated. She leaves the theatre in tears, and like one of the other actresses is so worried that she has to take her home. She's like, I'm getting you home. Like, girls supporting girls, I'm here for you. Okay, so I'm going to just throw in a content warning here. We're going to talk about attempted suicide, and I'm going to need you to skip forward like 20 seconds. Okay, go. She is so distraught that she downs 25 aspirin pills, determined to end her life. She writes a suicide note stating, "It ain't gonna rain no more." And she lies her head down to go to sleep. The next morning, she wakes up, fresh as a daisy. She is awakened by the sound of the telephone. That's right, the telephones, they would ring if you're younger than, 30, telephones would ring and you would have to like answer them. They'd be attached to the wall. It was wild, right? You couldn't just carry it in your pocket. Madness. So the phone is ringing and on the other end is none other than Noel Coward. He was kind of a big deal. He wanted her to be in his play. He wants her to play the lead role in Fallen Angels. And so she takes the job. So she's got this great job. She's living it up in London. She is friends with all the cool people during the Roaring Twenties, all of the bright young things. Like, she is in this scene. And so she's at every party. She has tons of admirers from both sets of the aisles. One who leaves her a fleet of cars. And just so many marriage proposals. I love the fact that she gets like a fleet of cars because she has this Bentley that she adores and she would love driving it around London. Unfortunately, she wasn't keen on learning directions or street names or like any routes, really. So she would call taxis to drive in front of her so she would know where to go. So she would follow them from A to B. Like, why bother learning anything? You can just go here and there. Like, sure. Like, that's a trick. Because she wanted to drive, but she didn't want to learn how to get there. That's extra. I love it so much. So as the decade is coming to a close, Tallulah is approaching 30 years old, and she decides it's time to leave London. The Baron was engaged to be married, and she was done. She was like, no, even though he was still like trying to like keep up with her. And she was like, you're getting married though, so nah. And so the thing is, she decides she's leaving London, but there are rumours going around town saying that she was chased out of London and forced to flee the UK. Which we weren't really sure about until a couple of years ago when certain MI5 files were unsealed So MI5, that's right, the spies, they were investigating her for her relationships with several pupils at Eton. So Eton is like this really fancy school for boys. They'd go there when they're in their like late teens. And so a bunch of these boys apparently spent a lot of private time with Tallulah. Now, we don't know like what age she was when they were there or the age of those boys, but either way, it's seedy as fuck. But also, imagine being chased out the country by MI5. Like, that's, again, I love her, but she's awful. Like, she's so bad. Oh, which means this is the perfect time to just put together a wee word from our sponsors. So, I'll see you after the break.
Have you ever thought about what would happen if your airline window popped out? Or if you can build a jetpack using only machine guns? Turns out you can, but you really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, host of a podcast that's for weird people who like learning about weird stuff. It's called, well, That's Interesting. And it's a comedy sciencey show that tells the story behind the facts, because as it turns out, those stories are funny. Every Thursday, I tell the tale behind a new, odd discovery, like how researchers found two mysterious structures surrounding Earth's core, or how it's actually possible to stop hiccups using a rectal massage. Yes, there's a story behind that, no pun intended, and I tell the story because storytelling is the perfect way to learn and remember. The facts are bizarre, the stories are epic, and the laughter is plentiful, so join the flock and listen to Well, That's Interesting, wherever you do podcasts.
And we're back, and so is Tallulah, because it is the golden age of Hollywood and Paramount Pictures is calling. So she goes to LA, rents a home in Hollywood, and begins hosting these lavish parties, and they are wild, like full-on, roaring, exciting, very few boundaries. And her career, not as impressive as her parties, to be honest, middling to fair to begin with, and her Hollywood career, I mean, it's fine, it's okay. And like, she ends up going into movies. Well, one, because she likes to work, because she enjoys it, and because it pays her bills. But also there was one movie where like she did it and she gets interviewed by one of the magazines, because Tallulah does not give a fuck. She is a honey badger. Tallulah Bankhead is the honey badger of people. So yeah, she gets asked why she did this movie. And she goes, "Darlings, the main reason I accepted the part was to fuck that divine Gary Cooper." And she said this in an interview. Like, this is a time where you weren't supposed to talk like this. So yeah, while she's hobnobbing in Hollywood, she meets Joan Crawford, who is very new on the scene. And she's like such a little ingenue, right? And she says to her, "Darling, you're divine. I've had an affair with your husband. You'll be next." And Joan Crawford is like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Bankhead, but I like men." And I just think is the funniest thing. It's like, "Oh, no vag for me. Oh no, I'm strictly dickly. Sorry." I love that, that she just panicked. I could understand that it would be like an intimidating and quite terrifying sort of situation. So one of these days, Joan Crawford, she's invited to one of Tallulah's like infamous parties. And so she arrives and she's in this beautiful dress. It is dusted with gold glitter and everyone is fawning over her, talking about how beautiful she is and fabulous she is, and everyone is like all eyes on Joan Crawford. And Tallulah, as we know, doesn't like it when other people get attention. And so she disappears mid-party and reappears on her balcony, absolutely starkers, completely in the nip, with only gold glitter adorning her pubic hair. And she stands there, glass in hand, and she goes, "Guess who just went down on me?" Which, frankly, I think is how the origin of vajazzling came about. Don't at me. It's just how I feel. So Tallulah found movies themselves actually pretty boring. She preferred to be on the stage. She hated the whole movie making process, but she liked the fame that went with it and the money. It's quite nice. So she does find movies boring, which is lucky because she ends up on an industry blacklist. So she has this interview, which is published. So she has this interview and she goes, "I'm serious about love. I haven't had an affair for 6 months. Too long. The matter with me is I want a man. 6 months is a long while. I want a man." She is openly saying she wants to shag, and that's just a big no-no during this time period. So there's this thing called the Hays Code, and Tallulah Bankhead's name is at the very top of the list on the Hays Commission. It's at the very top of the list in the Doom Book. That's what it's named, the Doom Book. And in the Doom Book, there are 150 actors and actresses who are considered unsuitable for the public, and this is presented to all the major studios. So Hays is so on board. The Hays Code's really interesting actually, because it's a period of time where women couldn't be objectified in film. If there was a couple in a bedroom, one of them had to have one leg on the floor all times. So you could have one knee on the bed, but your leg had to be on the floor like a flamingo. It was such a thing. And they had all these rules, so women would actually get really good parts. So Jean Tierney, Katharine Hepburn, Marlene Dietrich, they would get these really, really good juicy roles. And a lot of people, because of Hays and his fucking Doom Book, they would end up on this list. So Tallulah Bankhead is top of this list. And right next to her name is written verbal moral turpitude, which basically means depravity. She's depraved. She's ooh, a sex fiend. You know what I mean? So in retaliation to this, to be blacklisted from the major studios, Tallulah publicly calls Hays a little prick. So she ends up back on Broadway for 6 years, and she's struggling with average plays and bad reviews. And at 31, she just starts feeling ill, and she ends up being rushed to hospital. And loads of people are convinced she's pregnant. They're obviously, she's up the duff, right? I mean, we know Tallulah. She gets about. And turns out, she was not pregnant. She had untreated gonorrhea. And it was so bad that she had to have a full hysterectomy. And this operation lasted 5 hours. And by the end, she only weighed 5 stone. She was a shell of a woman by the time she left. But as she's out of surgery and she's dealing with the doctors, before she leaves, she says to them, "Don't think this has taught me a lesson. Maybe it should, Tallulah. Maybe don't have unprotected sex with people who have a shady sexual history. Perhaps you might want to add condoms onto your shopping list. It's just an idea." So she ends up having an affair with Rex Whistler, who's an artist, and he loses his virginity to her at 29. Because it's back in the day. Sometimes men would wait longer. They weren't all just running into brothels a la Bridgerton. So there's this story where she's at a hotel, and her friend was supposed to meet her at this hotel, and the maid tells her, "Oh, she's in the bath with Mr. Whistler." And upon hearing her friend, Tallulah shouts through, "I'm just trying to show Rex I'm definitely a blonde." So I love this. It's there's this thing as well, she's so very protective of other LGBT people in the scene. So there's this thing with Rock Hudson, right? And there's this whole issue. Is she gets asked if Rock Hudson's gay because they're doing a play together or whatever. And she responds with, "I don't know, I'm not fucking him." which is just fabulous because she was like, no, I'm not telling you that, you absolute arseholes. She has no shame. You cannot shame the shameless, and I love that about her so much. So anyway, she's in this, play Antony and Cleopatra. You know the one. And she meets John Emery, who she then marries. In 1937, they get hitched. She said he resembled John Barrymore. If you knew where to look. She's talking about his penis, okay? She's saying that he had a great penis, like the penis she saw in John Barrymore all those years ago. So, to the point that during her parties, he'd be asleep, or at least in bed, and she would bring people through, like guests, into the bedroom, fling back the covers and say, did you ever see a prick as big as that before? Can you imagine, I'm sure he was super into it to begin with. He was like, wow, this is amazing. My wife really loves my cock. She's showing it to people. But then after you start getting sleep deprivation from being woken up, and he's like, please stop showing people my massive knob. It's a lot. I need rest time. Thank you. Probably really impressed to begin with, and afterwards he was like, please stop. So yeah, it gets to the point where, she says that, but at one point she says, well, darling, the weapon might have admirable proportions, but the shot is indescribably weak. Yeah, it's not the size, mate, it's how you use it, I think is what that means. So it gets to the point where Emery just has enough. Partially because of, the constant sleep deprivation, but also because she's having affairs all over the shop. And he wants to divorce and remarry, and it's a whole thing. Meanwhile, she is part of what is known as the sewing circle. And this has Marlene Dietrich, Billie Holiday, Greta Garbo, and she would go to holiday shows nightly, by the way, accompany her on tours. And when Billie Holiday is arrested for opium, Tallulah Bankhead writes a letter to the head of the FBI, and it gets read out in court and everything because she stands by her. So they're really, really close, really close, very close, gals being pals, besties, best friends, roommates, who knows how they could be, just really good gal pals, super close, super tight. And then something happens and they basically never speak of each other again. They are just in it and then whoo, smoke, gone. Now, I know you might be thinking that Tallulah is spending every day just deciding between a fish supper or a sausage supper, which is the ultimate dilemma. But she's actually doing other things. She is politically active. She is a full-on supporter of the civil rights movement. Remember her dad is this massive politician, and so she gets him to pull strings to get the family of a Jewish director she knows out of Europe. Can we guess why? I'm sure we can guess why. Hey, anyone seen the revival of Cabaret? But yeah, Tallulah is so politically active, she's so involved, that she becomes the first white woman to appear on the cover of Ebony magazine. And she appears with her good friend, Louis Armstrong. So in 1939, she has her Broadway comeback in Little Foxes. And when she's doing this performance, this is her big comeback, and she gets a phone call from her uncle saying her father is ill. But Tallulah's the show must go on. And so she decides that she's going to finish her show, jump on the express train, still in her costume, and she's just going to go straight there. So she's on the express train, it gets into the station, and she steps off. And as she steps off, she is straight away hit with the news that her father is dead. And it wasn't long after this, she was also informed that the Baron, the love of her life, had passed away too. And this really hit her. Harder so because she wasn't drinking at the time. See, when she heard reports of Nazis and what was happening in Europe, she vows not to drink again until the British take Dunkirk. And she is true to her word. So she doesn't drink any alcohol, like, during the war. Like, she doesn't touch a drop. She is sober for years. That being said, in 1945, when, the British take Dunkirk, she is back to her 2 bottles of bourbon a day. And so, like, she's drinking again, and she's going on tour, and she's throwing her parties, and she's throwing this one party, right, where it is just so wild that the police end up getting called, and they arrive at the door, and she swings it open, and there she is, absolutely naked. And so they try and arrest her. So I love that. Like, we're going to arrest you for indecent exposure inside this building that you're in. And she's like, okay. And she punches the officer in the face. See, here's the thing. If I'm having that kind of party, I'm smothering myself in olive oil because I'm going to be like, catch me, piggy, piggy, and just run, So, but yeah, after her tour, she gets another job offer with one Mr. Alfred Hitchcock, who's also an arsehole, but he does make good movies. So she gets a part in Lifeboat, and there's this issue with, there's a reporter on set. Because here's the thing about Tallulah, is she wasn't a big fan of undergarments. Like, she didn't like knickers, they weren't her thing. And this reporter is watching her, and he's like, oh no. And he reports to Alfred Hitchcock, like, she's not wearing any underwear. I can see her muff. Like, she would even, like, there was this ladder they would have to climb up, and she would go first because she thought it was funny that people would have to look at her, her geese. Which is one of the reasons why Tallulah's a dick, right? Because if she was a man and she had just got her ghoulies flipping all over the place, we would all be really fucking mad about it. And like, this way it's kind of like, hee. In the time period, it would have been like, kind of funny. And subverting and all that kind of stuff. But also, people don't consent to that. That's not cool. Don't be flipping your flaps at people, okay? Don't do it. It's wrong. Consent is key, lads. Consent is key. So it gets to the point where this gets like brought up to Alfred Hitchcock, and he's just like, I don't know if this is a matter for costume, makeup, hairdressing, or props. And so nothing is done about it. So for her performance in Lifeboat, she wins the New York Film Critics Circle Award. And she has the best response to winning anything ever. And I'm totally going to do this if I ever win an award because I love it so much. She goes up, she gets her award and goes, darlings, I was wonderful. And then walks off. Like, that's perfection. Like, that is what I want to do. I want to be like, I'm great, bye. Oh my goodness, I did not talk about Gone with the Wind. Okay, so she does this screen test for Gone with the Wind. So she applies for it and everyone's like, she's amazing, the acting is perfect, she's wonderful. But it's in Technicolor. Things are moving into Technicolor. And they basically say she isn't pretty enough for Technicolor. And so that's how, because the age, they have to start like really young. Scarlett O'Hara has to go really young and they get much older. And that's how Vivien Leigh gets cast. Because Tallulah Bankhead, they thought would be amazing for the role, but just they didn't think she was pretty enough for the cameras. Like, anyway, it's still a good movie. But she does this screen test for the Glass Menagerie, which is what reminded me of this. And so she is this faded Southern belle. It's like the perfect role for her because it's sort of the epitome of where she's at. And the director calls it the greatest performance he'd ever seen. But the studio head Jack Warner, yes, of the Warner Brothers, there is no sister Dot, Maybe there is a sister Dot. But the Warner brothers are definitely... Anyway, he refuses because of her drinking and also because he's a dick. And apparently it was the most amazing performance, and we could have had the most amazing just sort of acting from this woman, and Jack Warner stopped that from happening. Fuck you, Jack Warner. I'm glad you're burning in hell. So, anyway, back to Tallulah's personal life. Ish. In 1950, her secretary was stealing from her, and she takes her to court. Now, the secretary's lawyers, they lie, like lawyers do. They absolutely bullshit it up, and they are accusing her of performing special favours for jobs, that she's like doing all this illicit activity. I mean, she's doing illicit stuff, but for fun. She's not doing it, to get up in the workplace. So they're just like spreading like libel. It's like false accusations. Whereas they could have just told the truth about her and it would have been probably just as damaging. But they decided to go overboard. And even though none of it was true, the damage is done. And in order to just like screw with people again, Tallulah ends up agreeing to do a tell-all book. And people were shocked. And so her mythos just sort of grows. Like, people are just astounded by just the Tallulah Bankhead. And everyone who was like around at the time, they had these stories. Everybody had a Tallulah Bankhead story. And they were always like bigger and better than the last. Like, there was one guy she was seeing, and what would happen is they would be like at a party, like at someone else's dinner party, and they would disappear and literally go shag in like the cloakroom where the coats were. And it would just be like, just because she could. Like, she would go off with people, and it's like she wasn't really that interested in sex itself. It was more the lead up and the chase and everything else that went with it. But yeah, it all kind of led up to that. So at one point, as she's getting older, Tallulah ends up on an episode of I Love Lucy. And Tallulah hates rehearsing. She's not a big fan of it. And she would show up late to rehearsals. She would show up drunk. And it got to the point where Lucille Ball and Desi, they didn't think the show was going to go ahead because they were like, how are we going to do this? Because she's not showing up. She's not doing it. Her lines, it's all shocking. But when they filmed it live on the night, she was not perfect. She was surprisingly sober. And it's like, there's this bit where Lucille Ball is doing this impression with, like, of Tallulah Bankhead. And, like, Tallulah is like, you do a really bad impression of me. And she goes, so do you! Because at this point, she kind of becomes a caricature of herself, and that was the parts that she was playing. And as she gets older, she's getting sort of frailer, and she's struggling a bit in her later years. And she ends up having this group of gay men called her caddies. And, they would have a cook and a chauffeur and a script reader. And she would just have these sort of men look after her. And they were specifically gay men. And she would have them care for her. And so she ends up performing in Fanatic, which I think it's very much a caricature of who she'd become as opposed to like her original acting, which is, how would I put it? Who was it? The character, I think it's Blanche in A Streetcar Named Desire. Like, it's based on Tallulah Bankhead. And this character in Fanatic is based on Blanche. So, like, Tallulah should be, like, really good at it. But it's so affected that it's just not really a great performance. Like, because she performed so much on stage, there were so few, like performances we can watch. And it's such a shame, because I would love to see that test screening. I would love to see things like that, but they're just gone. Like, and this is why I do like the digitization of certain products, especially film, because film is flammable. Like, it's dangerous and it erodes. And it would just be good to be able to look back and look at these old movies and shows and just, I love it. Like, I like old things, clearly, because I like history. So by the mid-60s, Tallulah is diagnosed with emphysema, which is no surprise because she had bronchitis as a kid, she suffered from pneumonia all her life, and eventually it just catches up to her. And in the winter of 1968, she is completely dependent on bourbon and painkillers. She is popping the full week worth of pills. She's got it all out. And on the 12th of December 1968, Tallulah Bankhead passes away in St. Luke's Hospital of pleural double pneumonia. Her last coherent words were, "Cocaine, bourbon," before slipping away. And 2 days later, she is buried in St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Maryland. And so ends our story of Tallulah Bankhead, the honey badger of humans. If you liked my retelling of this, I'm sorry if it was rushed and a little bit of pain, but I hope you liked it. I love talking about her, and there's so much more. I could talk about her for days. I love her so much. I do. I love her so much. She's amazing. I'm a big fan of bisexual women in Hollywood, golden age of Hollywood. Don't know if you noticed that. It's come up once or twice, but I love her so much because she's just, yeah, you know what I mean? So don't forget, you can follow me on the socials. I'm on all of them. I need to be more active on my Facebook, actually. But I'm setting up a sort of newsletter on the website so that I'm going to post once a month, just what's happening with the book, what's happening with this, just keeping on top of things, fun stuff that's happening, just keeping everybody up, I'm flying away to Copenhagen in the morning. No, I'm not packed. I'm so behind. I'm usually a really good packer. I pack way in advance, but I'm just so behind this week. But yes, that's where we are at. And so, follow me on the socials, DM me. I do answer, but make sure you DM me on Who Did What Now. If you contact me through the History Harlot, I can't read my messages for some reason. So I can't do that. So, but on Who Did What Now, I can answer messages, which is why I talk on there. Anyway, thank you for listening, delicious friends. I'm going to go have a shower and pack my bag and try and be organised. And I'll chat to you next time. Adios, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye-bye.